We are introduced to Kay that seems has just made the horrible mistake of going on a date with crazy psycho woman. After that he wakes up to find this old ugly goblin staring at him. He doesn't understand what's going on, but it seems he has been reborn as one of them. The elder gives him a new name Gobo, and then proceeds to shove a big and juicy maggot down his throat for that bonus protein. Since Gobo is a baby he can't speak or refuse anything. By day 2 he woke up to find himself surrounded by tons of ugly green babies. He is faced with the reality that he is just as ugly as them. He comes to terms with the fact that he died and was reborn as this weak and helpless baby, so he spends the rest of the day crying over the loss of his beautiful human face. By day 3 he realizes that goblins seem to mature away faster than humans do, but that doesn't change the fact that he is still bald. Though at least he is able to move and speak again now. While it's not ideal, he chooses to make the best of the new life he has been given and heads out to face the world. On day 4 mostly grown goblins meet with the elder once more as he's holding a platter of maggots for them. He tells them he is done with taking care of them since they are freeloaders. So after today they are on their own when it comes to finding food to eat. Gobo doesn't like the idea of eating maggots willingly, but it's pure protein so he scarfs them down regardless. Afterwards he now has to head out into the world all on his own. As he exits the cave, he finds a beautiful world with unfamiliar plants and creepy animals all around. One other goblin that have followed him is scared to be outside for the first time. Ever so Gobo tries to reassure him by saying, it's his first time seeing this place as well. The other goblin is Gobokachi. Although he is not very smart, Goburou decided to team up with him for one very important reason. He have the bulk genetics among the other, so he's going to be helpful hunting for food. They find a rabbit in the forest. Goburou sends Gobokachi to attack it from the front. The rabbit runs away from him, but this was all part of the plan as Goburou had set himself up in a nearby tree. So as soon as the rabbit got within range he leaps down from the tree and snaps the bunny's spine with that stick. This hunting strategy is really effective, but after the bunny has been caught, Gobokachi started getting a little greedy over the bunny, so Goburou had to smack some sense into him and tell that they should eat together. Here, after giving him a good dose of domestic abuse, Goburou begins prepping the bunny so can be ready for their dinner. He snaps the rabbit's horn off and after inspecting it, he figures he should be able to make a decent weapon out of this thing. Just then he sees a notification in his head and he doesn't know what to make of it, since the elder never gave a tutorial on this. But his thoughts are cut off as Gobokachi has recovered and he's salivating for his share of meat. Goburou conceives and pulls out the meat which Gobokachi proceeds to gobble up with gratitude. On the 5th day, the two continue their hunting strategy and Goburou has successfully implemented that rabbit horn as a weapon. He takes a new horn from the rabbit, he receives a notification in his head again but he's still not sure what it's supposed to be. He sits down to eat some meat, but once he takes a bite, his eyes begin to glow blue and he is informed that he has acquired an escape skill from the rabbit. It all makes sense to him now as he recalls that in his past life, he had the rare ability of absorption which allowed him to have a chance of absorbing the abilities of anything he eats. Although he still has absorption, it seems that all the other abilities he managed to gain have been reset since he is in a new body. It's still pretty lucky that he got to keep a skill at all, so he's okay with how things have played out, since there are plenty of monsters lurking in the forest that he can eat to gain power. By day 6, Goburou has already started attracting girls with his impressive meat. She was amazed that he and Gobokachi had managed to capture horned rabbits, when others have died trying to do the same. Since she actually has hair, is officially confirmed that goblins can have follicles, but Goburou and Gobokachi are just bald. Goburou asks if she would like to participate in their hunt for the next day and she was overjoyed at the offer. But on the 7th day, it rained so much that they had to postpone their hunt. Since he has nothing better to do, Goburou decides to go check out what they've got in storage, since he has never been back here before. However, he wasn't prepared for what he would see. There he found a group of captive human which proves that even in this world, Goblin Slayer was right all along. He's just going to try to ignore it, so he spends his time crafting a weapon instead. The goblin elder named Gobuji comes over to him, since he seems to be oddly motivated to survive. At this rate he believes Goburou might level up faster than expected. Goburou didn't know there was a level system here, so Gobuji tells him to tap his forehead, so he can see it. After doing so, Goburou sees that the elder is currently at level 86 and he mentions that, if one manages to reach level 100, then they'll be able to evolve into a higher being. However, goblins age so fast, that even though he's only in his 20s look quite too old. As he leaves, he tells Goburou that he'll get to see what an evolved hobgoblin looks like, When the promising youngsters return from the village and wonder what prey will they bring, Goburou felt that something doesn't seem right. The next day it was clear out, so Goburou went out hunting with the other two. Their teamwork is outstanding considering they are only a week old. With Gobni backup, Gobo is their mind range attacker and Gobokichi is their forward. With this formation they were able to get themselves a large portion of meat. Gobni is brought to tears as she takes a bite due to how thick and juicy it is. Goburou takes a bite as well and he end up learning several new skills from snake meat. The next day they kept hunting, but by day 11, they made the mistake of going into an unknown cave and they found themselves staring down a huge swarm of vampire bats. They immediately start running away, but the bats are too fast. Gobokichi and Goburou stay behind to deal with them. They were getting overwhelmed at first, but then Goburou uses the evil eye skill he acquired and freezes all the bats in place. With all the bats frozen in place, immediately they proceed to kill all of them. Afterwards they eat on their corpses. Goburou gains some new skills from eating the bat vamp. As they continue to eat like kings, they are washed by some of the other goblins who are starving, since they are too dumb to successfully hunt on their own. That night they attempted to attack Goburou. They take their frustrations out on him since obviously, he's the one with a problem, not them. Luckily he could sense them approaching. Thanks to skill he get before, he counterattacked them. Although he didn't really intend to kill anyone, he miscalculated on the amount of his venom skill to use, so one of the attacking goblins ended up dead. He didn't seem to care though, as he still wanted to teach the old lesson for trying to attack him. However, Gobni shows up, and after what she did to them for attacking her precious Goburou, even Goburou feels sorry for them. The next day they head out to hunt again. Their target this time was orc monster whose size was bigger than them. They throw a rock in its eye and while it's blinded, Gobokichi rushes in. The orc knocks him back with its pickaxe, but immediately after that, Gobni throw a rock to orc monster. They then proceed to claim its kneecaps by inverting the bend of its knees with a club, and to finish off, Goburou stabs it in the head several times. After the orc has been killed they enjoy its meat, but since they got a lot left over, Goburou decides they should take it all back to the cave, since there is something he wants to do. Once they brought all the excess back, Goburou calls the attention of all the broke and starving goblins, tells them that they can eat as much as they want as meat. After some initial hesitation, one after the other all the goblins drop to their knees and begin gobbling up Goburou delicious meat as he watches them. Goburou thinks about how he would never have helped people out like this in his past life. But maybe being reincarnated changed more than just his body. That night after everyone has gone to sleep, Goburou is laying down and trying to do the same, but the notification in his head won't stop playing. It says he has exceeded the level requirement, so he will be evolving into a hog goblin soon. However, he wasn't paying attention to it since he was so sleepy. The next morning something strange happens. As Goburou wakes up and discovers, he now looks different. He is confused why his appearance seems to have changed again overnight, plus he looks a lot more similar to the way he did before he reincarnated. More importantly, he is no longer bald. The same thing seems to have happened to Gobokichi as well. Gobni, although she stayed the same, she is loving the new look on her friends. The elder comes over to see what all the commotion is about, and he is shocked to find that both Goburou and Gobokichi have managed to evolve when they were literally born 2 weeks ago. Gobokichi gets Goburou attention and says he would like to test out how much stronger he has by fight him. Goburou was up for the challenge. They two head out to begin their match. They both begin punching out in the forest. Gobokichi is definitely a whole lot stronger than he was before, but he still lacks the combat skills. Goburou is able to slip under a punch and sweep his legs out from under him. Gobokichi admits defeat and praises Goburou for being so strong. Goburou gives him credit as well, since when it comes to power, Gobokichi is stronger than anyone else here. Just then Goburou hears some wolf noises in the distance. He can tell that something bad is going to happen soon. He calls for Gobni, who is hiding nearby, to spy on them, and tells her that she should go get the crossbow they had made earlier, because they are going to be needing it soon. After that, wolves are chasing a bunch of rabbits down the hill, and once they have successfully killed their prey, they lock on to their next unsuspecting target, but probably innocent orc that was just minding his own business. The orc starts run for its life, but the wolves aren't about to let it get away so easily. So they start chasing it down until they eventually catch up and tear it to pieces. Goburou watch this all go down, and they think the wolves will be the perfect opponent to test out how strong they have truly become since they evolved. Goburou gave signals to Gobni to begin firing at the wolves' leader. Once the leader is taken down, both Goburou and Gobokichi rush in to start smashing in the wolves. Without their leader, the wolves' teamwork was completely gone, so they were able to make quick work of them and slaughtered every single one. Afterwards there was just the leader wolf left standing, but he too would eventually succumb to the wounds he sustained, after he collapsed. Goburou approached and opened his mouth to take a huge bite out of the wolf, allowing him to gain some extra skills including one leadership skill. After that he takes the rest of the dead wolves back to the cave and tells the other goblins that they are free to eat as much as they want. But from now on he expects them to catch with their own food. They don't have the confidence to accomplish something like that, so they all get down on their knees and beg Goburou to teach them how to hunt for themselves. He agrees to train them in the ways of hunting if they don't know how, and if they need weapons, he'll teach them how to make those as well. This gets everyone to like him a lot, so he is cemented in as the leader of the goblins. It may partially be because of his leadership skill, but that doesn't matter to him. He will work hard to lead his comrades and he'll continue to eat and gain new skills as he goes, all for the sake of achieving his goal. Day 17. Goburou wakes Goburou up from his sleep to inform him of an incident. All the human women whom they had locked in the basement realize that Goblin Slayer isn't coming to save them. Rather than spending the rest of their lives as breeding slaves, they offer themselves with poison. Goburou and Goburou hold a memorial and burn them. By day 23, Goburou had begun training all the goblins in the ways of to be able to hunt and find food for themselves. He also spent some time hunting and eating any monsters that would provide him with useful skills, so he has got quite the arsenal of skills at his disposal now. Just then he notices several figures approaching from a distance, and while they may look like goblins, he's not the type to trust strangers blindly. He draws his sword and prepares to cut them down. However, he is stopped by Goburou, who tells him that those goblins are the fathers of the current generation of goblins. They're home with lot of food. Goburou, happy with the old goblins, returned, and they also happened to capture some more women to be used for breeding. So Goburou is rather glad about that as well. Goblin DNA is so strong that even if they mate with other species it will still result in a goblin baby. While Goburou can understand the instinct to reproduce, he still has to admit that this is really messed up and he needs to do something about it. He does over to the biggest hobgoblin of the older generation and asks if he can be in charge of taking care of the women, but the old goblin gets angry because he wanted to take them for himself. Goburou isn't one to back down, so a fight was about to break out between the two and both generations were ready to jump in help. Before the fight began, it got broken up by two bother goblins. They would prefer it if they didn't cause a civil war to break out between the generations, so they suggest that the two people with grudge settle in a way that won't get them involved. These two are Hobsato and Hobse. They suggest that the leaders of both generations have a battle to settle the disputes, so the winner will get to decide what the village does from now on. They also make a rule banning weapons so that no one ends up dying. The older goblin agrees to the term, not knowing he's about to get his ass beat, and a couple minutes later we see clear evidence that the older goblin indeed got his ass beaten. Goburou has him tied up in a spider's web, but he assures everyone that this doesn't count as cheating since the webs aren't a weapon. He produces it from his body like Spider-Man, thanks to a skill he got earlier. So with the current alpha tied up and beaten, Goburou has been crowned the new leader of the village, and no one dares to object because they don't want to end up like the old leader. Later Gobo goes and tells the captured women that he has instructed all the goblins not to lay a hand on them. He won't be touching them either, so they have nothing to worry about. He'll make sure they are well taken care of, and eventually he'll see to it that they are sent back to a human village. The girls are relieved to hear that they will be alright, but there has to be some kind of catch to a deal like this. So one of them asks Goburou what he wants them to do in exchange for their freedom. Goburou does feel bad for them, but that's not the only reason he chose to help them out. He has no other way to get any information on the matter, so he tells him that all he wants is to learn about the human world here. After talking with him for a bit, he finds out that these women were part of a traveling merchant group. When they were attacked by the goblins, all their men were slaughtered and they were the only ones who survived the attack, only to be captured and brought here. They start to cry after being forced to relive the tragedy they went through, but it's not like Goburou can say sorry to them. So he just gets up and walks away. Couple days pass and the women seem to be more cheerful regarding their current situation. But it's probably just their way of copying from the time he has spent with them. He has learned that humans in this world don't evolve the same way monsters do, but in exchange, they are able to take on multiple jobs. The red-haired one seems to be a rookie adventurer as far as Goburou can tell, but she's pretty weak as far as warriors, so he may have her join the goblins in training later. Speaking of training, Goburou made all the older goblins join in on the training as well, and it doesn't matter how old they are. If they get pissy with him, he's going to smack some sense into them. For the next few days Goburou focused on group exercises so that he could teach all the goblins the new rules he had set for them. The former leader is not happy about it, but he can't go against Goburou decisions anymore. On the 31st day it was rainy, so everyone stayed inside. Everything was perfectly normal, but then Goburou detection skill alerted him to some goblins heading towards the human women, and he knows what that means. The former leader has gathered a couple of his buddies and they were planning to have some fun with the humans. Goburou shows up behind them and he distinctly remembers spending a couple days going over the rules with them. But it looks like some people never learn, so he's going to have to teach the old man another lesson. The women wake up to the sound of Goburou killing one of the insubordinate goblins and they are obviously scared. The other goblins had heard the commotion and rushed in to see what happened. Goburou asks Gobkachi help him to drag all the goblins he tied up outside and to tell everyone to gather around because there's something he wants to show them. That night in the pouring rain Goburou proceeded to beat the rule-breaking goblins to death, leaving the former leader to suffer the worst fate as Goburou personal punching bag, until he was just barely alive, only to be left out in the rain to die a slow and painful death. With this Goburou asks if everyone understands the rules and what will happen if they break the rules. No one dares to say a word since then. The next day, it's back to the regular hunting and the group is up against a torn with scales that make it almost really difficult to pierce. The monster charges at Goburou, but he uses his spider silk to trap it in place and with it immobilized. Both he and Gobkachi were able to target its weak points and kill it fairly easily. After it has been defeated, Goburou and the others eat the meat. He gains several new skills, one of which is a skill called triple strike, and even though he is doing it himself, Goburou still has no idea how dangerous that monster will be if they face off again. That night while Goburou was in bed, the red-haired human came up to him and just climbed into bed with him. She was probably still just scared from what had happened the previous night, so Goburou let her sleep in his bed. However, by morning time Gobmi had gotten jealous, so she climbed into Goburou bed as well. The next morning, Gob, who had assigned to be carrying all the equipment, managed to evolve into Hobgoblin as well due to all the manual labor. She's now relevant to the plot as well. The training of the goblins has been divided into different units, with Gobokichi handling the armored units, Gobmi handling the range units and Hobsato handling the regular fighters, and now that Gob has evolved, she handles the training of the support goblins. Meanwhile Hobbs is busy doing absolutely nothing because she's the only mage among the goblins, meaning there's no one for her to train. After that Goburou decided to leave the training of the goblins to the appointed captains, while he heads deep into the forest to hunt some strong prey. While there he spots another trick horn in the distance, and since he has the element of surprise, he decides to try using a magic skill he had acquired previously. He casts some magic and once his attack hits the target that they had had so much trouble defeating earlier, was easily destroyed in a split second. That landslide victory may have made him a little too overconfident. He then decided further north into the forest, but only once he had gone in really deep and he remembered what Gobji had told him a couple days after he was born. Last month he was explicitly warned never to go into the northern part of the forest, because in there lives a crimson creature called the Red Bear, and now he has come face to face with said Red Bear due to his carelessness. Any rational being would have already started running away, but even though he can't guarantee it, Goburou still believes that he may be able to take this thing down if he comes up with a plan. He wants to kill and eat the bear to gain even more skill, so he activates his demise magic and gets ready to throw everything he has at the bear. Back at the cave, Gobmi is getting worried since she hasn't seen Goburou all day, and neither has anyone else since he left their training session that morning. But the others aren't really worried since Goburou is strong enough that he'll probably be fine, even if he gets himself into trouble. Back at the fight, the bear managed to dodge the attacks. He lost an arm in the process, but it's still every bit as dangerous as it was before. Goburou can tell that if he gets hit by one of those claw strikes, even the refined scales armor skill he got from the tricorn wouldn't be of any use to him. Just as he can't afford to take a single hit, he resolves to kill the bear as soon as possible. However, even after striking it in the skull with an axe, the bear still keeps chugging along, so Goburou is forced to step back and try something different. He attempts to use his spider webs to trap the bear, but is too strong for that and breaks itself free. The bear activates one of its own skills and launches a wave of fire at Goburou, which sets the whole forest ablaze. The bear begins walking away since it assumes there is no way Goburou survived that attack. But despite that blast of fire being around 2000 degree hot, Goburou still managed to survive. After getting to cover, he begins healing his arm while he thinks about his situation. He has never heard of such a thing as a fire-breathing bear before, so it looks like in order to take this thing down he's going to have to be willing to take some amount of damage. He heads back out as the bear is leaving and baits it into launching a fire blast at him once again, but this time he has come up with a plan to counter it and uses water magic to block the inferno. While he continues to charge forward, the bear's body is too hard to pierce normally from the outside, but it's probably a different story when it comes to the inside of the bear's mouth. So Goburou stabs his sword through the bear's mouth, leading to a wound which he assumes will be fatal. However, he gets snapped out of his confident smirk when the bear smacks him across the forest and into a tree. Goburou managed to take an arm from the bear, flash across the head and stab it through its mouth, but it is still showing no signs of collapsing. However, after that one strike, Goburou is on the verge of death and will definitely croak if he takes another one of those hits. But that just makes it more exciting for him. He charges back in and raises his axe to strike the bear, while the bear readies its claws to strike as well. But once the clash is over, one of Goburou's arms is seen flying through the air. The bear had indeed managed to rip his arm off, but at the end of the day, Goburou was still alive. Even if he is barely a step above passing out dead, he grabs the bear claw that is impaling him and takes a bite out of it. Gained 2 new abilities, but he succumbs to his wounds and passes out. Afterward, he then receives a notification that the level requirement have been reached, so he is allowed to evolve into a rare ogre class, which he immediately accepts. After some time, Goburou wakes up and finds he has evolved yet again. When he returns, other goblins are all in shock by how has become. The elder scolds him for being away and making them worry. After a long story, Goblin had been following him around non-stop, but before he addresses that he wants to get himself a change of clothes. As he enters the storage room, the women are frightened because they don't recognize him at first. But after he shows them his skills as proof of his identity, they calm down a bit. After that, one of the human girls takes a look at an battle axe that's been heavily damaged, which she seems happy to fix it. While Goburou is here, she informs him that she made a knife out of a magic stone, so she would like him to check it out. Goburou is impressed by all her hard work, so he gives her a pat on the head. Goblin and the redhead girl hate it, as they are jealous that Goburou is giving another girl his attention. Goburou then goes over to the twins to see how they are doing, but the work they have to do is a bit much for just the 2 of them to handle, so they ask Goburou if they can get a few extra hands to help. Since they asked, Goburou decides that he can tell a couple of the goblin girls to come help over here. The twins are happy to hear it. Even Goburou is amazed how quickly they started liking goblins despite literally having their entire family killed by them a week ago. He jokes that they would make great wives and the girls doesn't mind it. Next, he goes to check on the alchemist girl who has been busy making potions. He takes a look at one of the tube and he can tell it is poison, which the girl doesn't deny. She had made it for protection and was initially planning to squad wipe all the goblins by poisoning the food. But then she learned that there were trustworthy goblins like him, so she doesn't intend to use it anymore. See her smile. Goburou is happy, but he sends Ice Chill with killing Aura beside him. In the end, he spent the day with them all. The next day, Goburou realized that he could no longer do his regular training because in his ogreish state, even holding back against the other goblins, he nearly kills them, so he refrained from fighting them anymore. Gobkachi takes the loss really hard and decides to go hunting to clear his head, while Goburou is worried about him. He also knows he's got to give him some alone time. The rest of the day was spent with everyone going through their normal routines, and for once Goburou got a chance to just relax, as he passed the time by sewing next to Hobsi. Even though he lost an arm in his fight with a red bear, hasn't really slowed him down all that much since he has a slime skill to make up for it. But that aside, he tells Hobsi that he would like to get his book back, so he can finish reading it, but she just ignores him completely and just keeps reading it. The next day, Goburou was casually eating lunch when Gobi came running to him with an injured carbuncle in her arms. Goburou tries healing it first, but it has lost a lot of blood, so he says he'll have to ask the alchemist to make something to help her. After the treatment is done, the carbuncle wakes up and is confused about her current situation and questioning who all these strange people around her are. They explain everything to her, after hearing that she's grateful to them for saving her life. Even though she's a stranger to them, she says her name is Returner and she was attacked by some humans not too long ago, which is how she ended up in that state. Apparently the gemstone in the forehead of a carbuncle is worth a lot of money, approximately 1 billion gold coins, so it's no wonder that they are trying so hard to kill her for it. She asks Goburou to help her chase away the adventurers that are after her because she is not going to live much longer. Returner is an artificial carbuncle created by a legendary wizard long ago with the purpose of guarding the treasure of the wizard. However, during the attack, the core that keeps her alive was heavily damaged, so there's no way she'll survive much longer at this rate. Her master held a major grudge against humans while he was alive, so even in death, he would rather let his legendary treasures go to a bunch of goblins rather than let humans get their grubby lits on them. So if Goburou helps her to get rid of those adventurers, then she'll gladly hand over all the contents of the treasury to him. This is a golden opportunity, so Goburou is not going to let it slip through his fingers so easily. He calls for everyone to gather around and tells them all that they will be going to this treasury today to chase away some humans. He asked the blacksmith girl if she had the spirit stone knife she was talking about the other day, so she gives it to him. He doesn't normally use a knife, but he thinks it would be better than going in empty-handed if his goal is to intimidate them. The goblin squad all head into the treasury that Carbuncle talked about, and once inside, Goburou asked Gobkachi and the others to hide first, so he could try to negotiate with humans. He walked around looking for the adventurers on his own, but then those same adventurers cornered him out of nowhere. They grumbled amongst themselves about having it deal with an ogre as well now, but they just decide to get rid of it as quickly as possible. An assassin tries to go in for a stealthy kill, but Goburou sees it comes mile away and is able to block the strike with his bare hand. The adventurers are shocked that the assassin's concealment was seen through so easily, but then Goburou interrupts them and yells that they are in someone else's home right now. They are trying to steal from it and even nearly killed its guardian, and on top of that they don't seem to think there's anything wrong with what they are doing. They are in luck today because Goburou is a nice guy and will give them a chance to spare themselves. Seeing that, they start attacking him, but they are so weak that he can dodge their strikes effortlessly, so he still gives them the offer to turn around and walk away before things get ugly. Unfortunately, humans are known for their sudden lack of brain cells when thinking is necessary. So despite the fact that Goburou is very clearly out of their league, they keep attacking until he finally loses patience and is ready to crack some heads. The adventurers shouldn't have messed with Goburou, but it's already too late to go back, as Goburou uses his earth magic to trap them in place and calls for the others to begin jumping these guys. After they were done beating up the adventurers, they stripped them of everything they had on them and kicked them all out. Goburou decides to eat all the loot and ends up gaining the skills of the items as well. He's now able to summon an item box that can store over 100,000 items in it. Since he has held up his end of the bargain, Returner leads Goburou and the others to the treasure room where her master took his final breaths. Amongst all his cool stuff, this was the great wizard Velvet, and Returner says he was quite well versed in conversing with the spirits, which is why he was able to gather such a large quantity of spirit stones. Her time has come to an end, so she once again thanks Goburou and the others for their help and disappears in his hand, leaving behind her head gem, which Goburou eats. They all take a moment of silence for Returner. Gobkachi asked Hobe about her condition and she said thanks for worrying her. After that, they start looting the place for anything that looks like it could be valuable, and his new item box came in handy with this part. But before they left, Goburou felt bad about leaving the body out in the open like this, so he decides it would be best if he burned it, and as he does so, the body turns to ash, leaving behind a gauntlet, which Goburou doesn't hesitate to put on the gauntlet. It seems to be a legendary magic item, so once he equips it on his lost arm, it attaches itself to him and replaces his missing arm. The arm has some really cool features, including the ability to rotate as well as produce poison and strings, but most importantly it can function like a regular hand as well. The next day, Goburou spent a lot of time assessing all the gear they got from the treasury, and considering it was collected by a legendary wizard, every item is top of the line in power. The following day, Goburou distributed the magic items to the hobgoblins among the group. He kept this vermilion spear as well as a legendary magic bracelet for himself, so in total he now has 3 legendary magic items all to himself. On day 40, Goburou decided to hold a series of battles to determine the ranks among the different hobgoblins. The day after that, Goburou headed out early in the morning to go hunt some prey that he has never fought before. First was the golden spider, which he took out in one punch, and after eating its meat, he received another skill and allows him to create golden threads. As he continues walking through the forest, he ends up under a tree that's bathed in light, and this is kind of a problem for him, since this is the home of a species called dryads. They prey on the men of intelligent races and seduce them into becoming a nutrient supply. Gobji had told Goburou about them, and he personally wants to go out while being sucked dry by a dryad. But Goburou would never go for something so luxurious, or at least that's what he tells himself, because the second a dryad appears and starts getting up close and personal, Goburou merely folds on the spot. He tries to think about this calmly, but then he remembers that he is still a virgin in this world, so all reason gets thrown out the window as Goburou activates his sacred skill he got from Orc Monster. The dryad is amazed by the enormous aura of what she feels. And then in a couple of hours a lot was happened. By the time they were done, The Dryad was asking him to come back again soon for another round. Goburou then heads over to a nearby waterfall to wash himself off. But he was soon surrounded by a squad of lizardmen for no reason, so he beat them along with everything else that tried to attack him. The next day Goburou found out there were 2 goblins who had the ability to become mages. So he sent them to be trained under Hobse. But he can't say he likes the look on her face when she thinks about getting to teach other goblins. In other news, all the girls in the cave are suddenly mad at Goburou. He can't figure out why since none of them will tell him. He ends up going to the green-haired girl to ask for some advice since she seems to be the most level-headed person here. So she tells him that everyone is mad because they know he went going out with another woman. Recently the Dryad left some very recognizable marks on his neck, so they are jealous that he didn't choose him first. The green-haired girl feels the same way as well, but rather than take the jealous silent treatment approach, she chooses to be a little more proactive with her feelings. We've already seen that Goburou folds easier than a blanket in these kinds of situations, but Goblin refuses to let it happen, at least not unless she gets to join in as well, and everyone else has the same thoughts. A lot more happened that day which required Goburou put up the soundproof wall in his room, but he doesn't want to talk about it,